Let's wait for a minute. Let me quickly introduce myself. Myself, Sai. I have around 7 years of experience on Salesforce platform. So initially, I worked as a developer, and post that, like uh, I worked as it, and currently I'm working as a Salesforce release or DevOps engineer. So what I will do today is, so I will give you a brief background on how DevOps works in Salesforce ecosystem, and I will also tell you the kind of roles which you will handle as a Salesforce release or DevOps engineer. So apart from that, I will also show you the skills that are required in order to handle this particular role, and I'll show you the course content as well. So you can, all of you can stay on mute. So after I complete my narration, I will give you few minutes so that if you have any questions, you can ask me. So let me share my screen. Give me a minute. I'm just opening a couple of documents. So meanwhile, I open the documents. Like how many of you have some kind of experience on Salesforce? So if you have any kind of exposure to Salesforce, you can type in yes in the chat. So if you don't have any kind of exposure, you can type in no. Okay. So I got. So let me wait for a minute in order to check the responses. I got six responses as of now. So there are 14 people in the bridge. One, two, three. Okay, so if someone has not understood my question, I'm just checking, how many of you have some kind of exposure to Salesforce. So if you have any kind of exposure, you can type in yes in the chat. Otherwise, you can type in no. Okay. Okay, so I think few of you have experience on Salesforce platform, and some of you does not have any kind of exposure. Okay, no worries. So let me quickly open a doc. So let me share my screen. Okay, so what I will do first is I will tell you what is meant by DevOps and how DevOps process works in Salesforce ecosystem. Post that, I will show you the course content. So now, in order to understand the term DevOps, so before understanding the term DevOps, you should understand few other terms. So there is something called as SDLC, or Software Development Lifecycle. So you should be aware of this particular term. So generally, SDLC stands for Software Development Lifecycle. So the meaning of software development lifecycle is, so it is nothing but it is the time period starting from planning to build an application to making the application available for end users. So the reason why I'm saying that you should be aware of this particular term is DevOps is one kind of process which will be used in the process of building an application. So now when it comes to software development lifecycle, it is nothing but it is the time period or the time it takes in order to plan to have an application and build that particular application. So it is nothing but the amount of time between planning to have an application and making the application available for end users. So that is the meaning of software development lifecycle. So generally, so I'm saying that DevOps is one kind of process which comes into picture in the process of developing or building an application. So how the development of application starts in real time is, so generally like what happens is like any business, so any business like whichever wants to increase its profits or in order to increase its range of customers, what happens is like they will go with this something called as applications. So now whenever a business plans of to have an application in order to run their business, so what happens is they will reach out to a software company and they will explain the kind of business whichever they are doing. And apart from that, they might also explain the software company that they are looking for an app in order to like enhance their business, and they will also tell them about the kind of features which they are looking in that particular app. So this happens in the backend. So now whenever business explains these things to a software company, so what happens is like in software company, we will see people with different roles. Like we will see people, uh, some people with a role called as architects, and we will see someone with a role called as manager or project management, and we will also see someone called as developers, and we will see someone called as testers or QA engineers. So like there will be different category of people available in the software companies. So now what happens is like together all of these people will work on building that particular application. So that's what happens in the back end. So before like starting the development of an application. So now when it comes to the different stages that are involved in software development lifecycle, so these six stages are involved in software development lifecycle. So the first stage or first phase will be called as planning phase, and the next stage or next phase will be called as defining phase. So after defining phase, there will be something called as designing phase, and after designing phase, there will be something called as building phase. After building phase, so there will be something called as testing phase, and after testing phase, the final phase will be deployment phase. So now, when it comes to what happens in these phases, so planning phase is nothing but in planning phase. So someone whoever plans to have an application will just think think about the application and the features that should be part of that particular application. So it is nothing but just a kind of plan or thinking in order to have an application. So that's what happens in the planning phase. So in the defining phase, what happens is like whatever be the things that will be planned in the planning phase will be documented. So like whatever be the kind of features that should be present in that particular app will be documented, and they will be kept on like by documentation, I mean like they will be kept on a paper. So like all of the requirements or all of the features of that particular app will be kept on a paper. That's what happens in defining phase. And the next phase is designing phase. So in the designing phase, what happens is like these features or requirements of application will be analyzed by an architect. And what the architect will do is, so he will choose a platform on which that particular application should be built. Apart from choosing the platform, he will also makes a note of all of the things that needs to be implemented in order to build that particular application, so with all of the features whichever have been noted. So that's what happens in the designing phase. And in the building phase, so in the building phase, what happens is like the actual development of application happens. So like whatever be the things that will be drafted in the designing phase will be passed on to a team of developers. And these team of developers, what they will do is, so they will build that particular application. So after developers build the application, so what happens is like the application whichever is built by the development team will be tested by the testing team. So after testing team tests that particular application, and if they feel like the application is working as expected, so finally the application will be made available for end users, or the application will be released into live environment. So that's what happens in all of these phases or stages. So now, before I tell you the definition of DevOps, so there are few other terms which you should be aware of. So one is environment. So environment in software terminology is nothing but it is a place where an application lives or runs in. Now, in order to understand this, so you can consider a mobile phone or laptop, or even desktop as well. So now, here, like what I'm trying to take here is, like, in order to understand the term environment, you can consider either mobile phone or laptop. So if you consider an app on a mobile phone, so if you look at all of the things that makes in order for the app to run is, so generally, so if you let's consider a mobile phone. So mobile phone is nothing but it is a collection of physical components. So on top of mobile phone, so what happens is, like, people will install something called as operating system. In Android phones, we will use Android OS, and in iPhones we will use iOS. So on top of mobile phone, what happens is, like, people will install operating system, and on top of operating system we will install something called as applications. So together, all of the physical components whichever makes the mobile phone and operating system will make the environment. So which makes it environment is nothing but they will have all of the things whichever will be required in order for an application to run. So the same thing happens with an application on laptop as well. So even laptop is nothing but it is a collection of physical components. On top of that, we will install something called as operating system, and on top of operating system, we will install the applications. So together, operating system and the physical components makes up the environment whichever is required for an application to run. So now, so apart from environment, so you should be aware of something called as live environment. So the meaning of live environment is, so it is a place where the application will be used by, so it is a place where the application will be used by end users. Now the purpose of building any application is, so like for every application, like there will be some kind of users who will be making use of that particular application. So the purpose of building any application is, like generally, that particular application will be accessed by some kind of users. So now live environment is a place, so where the application will be used by end users. Now, apart from live environment, the other environments which you will see in the process of building an application is development environment, or dev environment in short. So development environments are the environments where the development of application happens. And apart from development of environments, you will also see something called as testing environments. So testing environments are the environments where the testing of the application happens. Testing of application and development of an application. So now you may get a doubt, like, so why we should use a separate set of environments for development, testing, and even live. So there are some valid reasons for this. So because of those valid reasons, what happens is, we won't prefer developing the application directly in live environment, and similarly, for some valid reasons, we won't prefer testing the application directly in live environment. So even we can't test the application directly in development environments. So there are some reasons for this. So like in order to tell you a simple reason, so let's consider the case of a banking application. So if you take a banking application, so what happens is like they bank is nothing but generally the purpose of banking application is in order to transfer money from one account to another account. So what happens with these banking applications is like if you take one of the feature which everyone will make use of in a banking application is like people will do uh, transfers from one account to another accounts. So let's assume that there are two users. So name of one user is user one, and like users or let's assume there are two accounts, account one and account two. So let's assume the balance in account one is 1 lakh, and name of account one, like the person whoever is holding this account is, let's assume that the name of that particular one is name of that particular person is user one. So similarly, let's assume so there is one more user who is holding another account. Let's assume balance in his account is some 2 lakh, and let's assume name of the person holding account 2 is user 2. So now if let's assume a case of like a person whoever is holding this account one want to transfer 1 lakh rupee to this particular account, like who's like the second account, and the name of the user whoever making use of this particular account is user 2. Let's forget about the names. Let's assume that there are two accounts, one is account 1 and the other one is account 2. Now let's assume that we need to transfer a amount of 1 lakh from account 1 to account 2. So now when when we need to do this, what happens like person holding this account 1 will initiate a transaction, or he will make a payment from his account. And what he will do is like after clicking on payment, he will select the person to which the amount needs to be transferred, and he will enter the amount that needs to be transferred. And after entering the amount and clicking on send or transfer, what happens is like the transfer happens to the selected account. So now before like in order before this transaction happens, what happens is like there will be few kind of checks that happens in the backend. So now whenever a person tries to transfer an amount from his account to another account, so the first thing that happens in the backend is, so like the application, the banking application, so in the backend it will check whether the amount to be balance in his account is greater than the amount to be transferred or not. So if the balance in his account is less than the amount to be transferred, so what happens is like the transaction doesn't happen. And apart from that, so after the transaction happens, the balance in the account from which the transfer was made gets updated, and it reflects the balance that will remain in his account after deducting the transferred amount. So similarly, after the transaction happens, what happens in account 2 is like the balance in this account gets updated with the amount whichever got credited. So these things happen in the backend. Now let's assume a case of directly a banking application was directly built in live environment, and once the end user started making use of this particular application, so what happened is like the bank employees or bank people notice that even though balance in the customer's accounts is not greater than the amount to be transferred, transactions are happening. So like if such kind of issue is noticed directly in the live environment, so then it is a kind of loss to the business. So it is nothing but it is a kind of loss to the business. So in order to avoid these kind of issues, like this is one simple example which I am telling. So like this, like there will be some other valid reasons as well. So in order to avoid these kind of issues, what happens is like people will not build the application directly in the live environment, and for a similar set of reasons they won't even test the application directly in live environment. So because of that, what happens is like people will make use of separate environments in order to build the application and take and test the application. So similarly, So there are some valid reasons because of which testing of an application can't be done directly in development environment. So like we will come to those reasons later, but for now, what you can assume is like for some reasons, like we will use multiple environments in the process of building an application. So now, when it comes to the definition of DevOps, so DevOps is nothing but it is a process, or it is one kind of process which will be used in the process of building an application, which aims to improve the efficiency of software development lifecycle. So, like in order to keep it simple, it is nothing but it is a process which will be used in order to improve the efficiency of software development lifecycle. So when I'm saying that it improves the efficiency of software development lifecycle, first you should be aware of the hurdles that people will face in the process of building an application. So generally, like in the process of building an application, so people will face some kind of hurdles. So like DevOps will aim to overcome those hurdles. So that is the primary purpose of DevOps. So like I will tell you about these hurdles in the later sessions when we start the actual course. So even if I tell you those hurdles now, you won't be able to understand. So like we'll come to these hurdles now. So for now, like a DevOps is nothing but it is one kind of process which will be used in the process of developing an application, and the primary purpose of it is like it will target to improve the efficiency of software development lifecycle. So that is the meaning of DevOps. Now next is, so when it comes to how DevOps process looks in Salesforce ecosystem, so what happens is like Salesforce is a kind of Salesforce is nothing but it is a cloud platform. Now, so when it comes to infrastructure management, so like infrastructure management will be handled by Salesforce itself. So infrastructure management is nothing but, so like if you take like developing an application on a different platform apart from Salesforce, so what happens is the like even we are required to spin up something called as servers. So when it comes to Salesforce, like you won't be required to spin up servers, like in order to build spin up those servers, like there will be some kind of configuration which you should do. So but here on Salesforce platform, what happens is like you won't be required to do the same kind of configuration whichever people will do in other kind of platforms. So like infrastructure management will be handled by Salesforce itself. So apart from that, so what happens is like you will be primarily responsible for spinning up the environments. And let me keep it in this way. So when it comes to the roles which you will handle as a DevOps engineer on Salesforce is, so what happens is like you will be primarily responsible for these things. So you'll be responsible for spinning up or creating environments. And next is you will be responsible for setting up CI/CD process. You will be responsible for migrating the code from one environment to another environment.
Can you share the full screen? It is not visible.
It is not visible. One second.
Font size is, I think, small. So,
One second. So are you seeing this like one document where I am typing in some content?
yes, that is okay. But I think letter size is small. So,
Letter size is small. So is it same for everyone or only for you? Okay, so like, do any other person is like facing the same issue apart from Manoranjan? So are you able to see the content which I'm typing in?
Yeah, able to see.
Okay, so Manoranjan, have you joined through mobile or laptop?
Laptop.
Okay, so okay, no worries. So I'm not sure like why you are not able to see. So I will increase the font size. So I hope you can see it now.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So now what I am trying to do here is I am trying to tell you the roles, sorry, role, not the responsibilities of a Salesforce release engineer or a Salesforce Devops engineer. So we can also call them as roles as well. So now you will be primarily responsible for doing these things. So one is creating environments and the other one is setting up CI/CD process, and the other one is migrating code from one environment to another environment. And next is you will be responsible for providing access to uh, these environments. So you will provide access to developers and few others to these environments. So now, so creating environments on Salesforce platform is a simple thing because like all of the infrastructure will be managed by Salesforce itself. So like the creation of environments is a very simple thing. Like you can create the environments just by point and clicking. So like this is a very simple thing. So apart from that, so if you look at the other responsibilities, you will be responsible for setting up the CI/CD process, and you will be responsible for migrating the code from one environment to another environment. So like when it comes to these two roles, like you should be aware of few tools in order to handle these two roles. And apart from this, like the next responsibility which you will handle is like you will be responsible for providing access to people to different environments. So one and four are very simple things on Salesforce. When it comes to two and three, you should be aware of few set of tools in order to do uh, like in order to handle these two roles or responsibilities. So now let me tell you the skills that are required in order to handle this particular role. So you should have knowledge on a couple of build tools. So there are a few build tools available on Salesforce platform, but if you have knowledge on couple of build tools, that is sufficient. So like one of the build tool which you should have knowledge on is SFDX or Salesforce CLI. And apart from this, like if you have knowledge on something called as ant migration tool, that will be fine. So even though people are not making use of ant migration tool nowadays, like it will be useful for you just in terms of giving the interview. So if you have knowledge on these two build tools, and if you have knowledge on Git, and if you have knowledge on couple of automated tools like Copado, AutoRabbit, GearSet. So like there are few automated tools available on Salesforce platform. Uh, there are many. Like there are some Flowsum, and so there are few other tools as well. So if you have knowledge on couple of automated tools, that is sufficient. So apart from this, so like you should also have knowledge on something called as YAML scripting, and if you have knowledge on some of the basics of shell scripting, so that is sufficient. And apart from that, you should also have some basic knowledge on Salesforce admin. And apart from that, you should also be aware of how we can create environments on Salesforce platform. So if you have these skills, so these are sufficient in order to handle all of these responsibilities. So now what we are going to do cover in this particular course is, so like you can get the course content documentation by getting in touch with the institute people. So what we are going to cover in this particular course is like we are going to start off with something called as workbench. So workbench is nothing but it is a kind of web tool which will be used in order to migrate components from one Salesforce environment to another Salesforce environment. So there are some other purposes of workbench as well, but what we are going to do is we are going to see how we can migrate Salesforce components from one environment to another environment using workbench. So we will start with the workbench, because like you will understand few basic principles of how we can migrate components from one environment to another environment on Salesforce platform. So that's the reason I'm going to start off with workbench. So after workbench, we are going to see a build tool called as SFDX or Salesforce CLI. So we are going to see all of the features of this particular tool and all of the things which we should be aware around this particular tool. So after this, so we are going to see the features of Git. So in Git, what we are going to do is like we will see like what is meant by Git, and let me increase the font size again. So in Git, we will see what like the things like what is meant by Git, and the different features of Git, like what is meant by repository, what are branches, what is the purpose of a repository, and what is the purpose of a branch, and we will see something called as branching strategy. So like we are going to see all of the things which are you should be aware of on Git. After this, so what happens is like we are going to cover one more build tool, so which is called as ant migration tool, and post this. So after seeing this, what happens is like I am going to start uh, with some basics of shell and YAML scripting. So if someone who doesn't have any kind of programming language, so you are not required to worry, because like when it comes to shell and YAML, so like these are not uh, complex languages. So these are very simple scripting languages. So when it comes to shell, like you should be aware of some basic commands. And even when it comes to YAML, it is one of the simplest language which anyone can learn. So even someone doesn't have any kind of programming language, you are not required to worry about that. So after covering and migration, after covering Git, so I will cover some of the basics of shell and YAML scripting. So post that, what we are going to do is we are going to consider two cases of two real-time projects. So for one project, we will consider Salesforce CLI or SFDX as the build tool, and for the other project, Salesforce CLI or SFDX as the build tool, and Bitbucket as the repository. So in this particular project, in order to automate the deployments, so we will configure something called as Bitbucket pipelines. So like while looking into this particular project, what we will do is, so we will set up all of the things from scratch. So like we will consider a case of a real-time project, and we will set up all of the things from scratch. Like we will create environments, we will create repositories, and after creating the repository, we will create branches, and after creating the branches, we will create something called as pipelines, and post that we will also see how we can provide access to people to these repository and environments. And after that, we will consider examples of real-time requirements. So like in real time, what happens is like people will work on something called as user stories or tickets. So we will take examples of real-time requirements. So we will create or develop few of the requirements in development environment, and post that we will see the migration process from development environment to testing environment, and we will see the migration process from testing environment to production environment. So that's how these two real-time projects will be explained. So after this, like after we complete this SFDX and Bitbucket combo, what we will do is we will consider one more real-time project where SFDX or Salesforce CLI will be the build tool, and GitHub will act as the repository. So even for this particular project, so we are going to set up all of the things from scratch, and we will see the migration process similar to this particular project. So here we are going to see something called as GitHub Actions in order to automate the deployments. After this, so after covering these two, what I will do is I will cover a tool called as Copado. So in Copado, like we are going to cover all of these features of that particular tool. When it comes to Copado, like even for this, like we are going to consider an example of a real-time project, and we are going to set up all of the things from scratch here as well. So in the process of setting up these things, like we will learn all of the features of this particular tool. So when it comes to Copado, it has two variants. One is Copado Enterprise and the other one is Copado Essentials. So we are going to cover both of the variants of Copado. So first we will see Copado Enterprise, and post that we are going to see Copado Essentials as well. So after this, so like earlier I used to give a brief overview of AutoRabbit, but AutoRabbit is a kind of strictly licensed tool. So like it won't be possible to get a trial account for AutoRabbit. So what I will do is I will replace AutoRabbit with GearSet, as GearSet offers trial accounts. So I will make use of like I will show you how we can set up the things using GearSet. So apart from this, so like actually like after covering Copado, I will also show you something called as chain sets. Chain sets is nothing but it is a native migration tool, or a native migration feature offered by Salesforce in order to migrate components from one Salesforce environment to another Salesforce environment. So after seeing changes, we will also see something called as sandboxes. So sandboxes are nothing but these are the kind of environments which people will make use of for developing as well as testing the application. So we will see the different types of sandboxes or environments available on Salesforce platform, and we will also see how we can create these sandboxes, and what is meant by sandbox refresh. So these are the things which we are going to cover in this particular course. So like what I will do is so I will start off with workbench in tomorrow's session, and suppose that we will start with something called as SFDX or Salesforce CLI. So in order to cover all of these things, so I will require some 25 to 30 days, and each day we will have a session of 1 hour daily. When it comes to the timings, so it will be either the same time, like 7 to 8 a.m. or 8 to 9 a.m. So it will be between 7 to 9 a.m. in the morning, or 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. in the evening. So it depends on the feedback whichever we receive from the people. Yeah. So now, so that's it from me. Like I'm not going to start off with workbench today. So we will see workbench in tomorrow's session. So now, if you have any questions, you can ask me. So someone posted a question saying that you will cover Copado and GetSet deployment tools in full. Yeah. So I'm going to cover them.
Do you cover Salesforce Devops Center too?
Sorry,
Salesforce Devops Center.
I didn't understood your question, Mahesh.
Basically, Salesforce is offering Salesforce their own DevOps, right? DevOps Center.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. Are you going to cover that too as part of DevOps training?
Going to cover Salesforce Devops Center here. So the reason is, so what happens is the reason why I'm going to cover many tools is, so if you have an understanding on setting up the process using couple of tools, you will be able to set up the process using any kind of other tool as well. You will notice that because like the steps will remain the same, but there will be a slight difference in the way how we configure the things. So after we cover couple of tools, you will notice that. So like even after I cover couple of tools, if you are in a situation like you are not able to set up the things using other tool, so definitely I will help you on that.
Sorry, Sai. So my point is that are you going to conduct this class, or is again same thing will happen after one class you get? So my point
So
is
I
that
think,
because
uh,
I'm waiting
have you joined for earlier demo?
earlier demo and I waited for that evening batches. Okay, you told
Sorry,
that
sorry.
I
Earlier.
I joined that batch, evening batch, and you told that I'll continue, but after that no response and nothing.
Okay,
That's
so
why.
actually like so I'm not sure like for which demo you attended. So like
I attend that evening demo 8 to 9, and you started that workbench started. Okay, workbench
mm-hmm.
also over.
Okay, okay, okay,
After
okay.
that,
Okay. So actually, Manoranjan, what happens is like based on the number of account whichever we receive, we institute people will form a batch and we'll go with that particular batch. So I think for the demo whichever you attended, few people might have confirmed to continue in the course. That's why I think the batch was not formed at that time. So generally, like these people will take 2 to 3 sessions in order to finalize the batch. So that's what happens.
let's see this time.
Yeah.
Let
So you
me
can
know
check.
when it will be
Yeah,
start
you
and
can,
all. Okay.
like even I can't assure you on that because like it depends on the institute people itself. So you can check with the like you can convey the same to the institute people that I have attended a demo and a couple of
No, I
sessions.
informed to them, but no response and nothing. They told the faculty is not willing to take evening classes like that. They're saying.
Yeah, yeah. So I think like this time you won't face that kind of issue. So like you can directly speak with the institute management. Otherwise, all of you stay on the bridge for a while. So let me also tell you few things on workbench as well. So what I will do is I will someone is asking can you also cover auto rabbit just the basics. Yeah, so like if you want, definitely like I will give you a overview on how we can set up the things using auto rabbit as well. So now stay for some 15 to 20 minutes, so I will tell you a few more things. So what I will do is I will tell you how we can do the migration using this particular tool called as workbench. So in order to do this, what I will do is I will consider two Salesforce environments. So I will consider one environment as dev environment. So I'll consider one environment as dev environment and the other one as QA environment. So what I will do is I will create a component in dev environment and I will migrate it to QA environment. So now, in order to do this, so the first thing is in order to have these environments, what you can do is you can create Salesforce accounts. So generally, in order to practice what Salesforce will do is like it will offer free accounts which are called as developer edition accounts. So what you can do is, so in order to create a developer edition account, you can type in developer edition Salesforce, or you can simply type in developer edition Salesforce instead of developer edition sign up. So like when I typed in developer edition Salesforce, you are seeing a result called as developer edition sign up. If you click on this, what happens is like you will be redirected to a page where it will ask you to provide some basic details. So here, what you can do is you can provide your basic details like name, email address. So all of these are basic details. So for username, so like while giving a value for username, it should be in this particular format. So the format of username should be like something at the rate something dot something. So here you can see a sample format as well. So you can create couple of orgs. So what you can do is, in order to differentiate dev environment and QA environment, in the end of the username, whichever you plan to give, so you can even specify, like you can even use your email as the username. But just to differentiate from one environment to another environment, you can append name of the environment in the last. So it's not like you should use your email only. You can use any other value as well. So the format should be something at the rate something.com. followed by, in order to differentiate the environments, you can append the purpose for which you are creating that particular account or environment. So here, if you are planning to create the account for dev environment, you can append dev in the end. And if you are planning to create that particular account for QA environment, you can append QA in the end. So by this, what happens is like you will be able to differentiate those environments. So after giving this, you can click on sign me up. When you click on sign me up, what happens is like you will receive an email to the email whichever you specify here. So like that particular email contains account verification link. Clicking on that, what happens is like you will be able to set a password for this particular account. Like I am not going to click on sign me up because like it is a simple thing, and as I have multiple accounts already created, I'm not going to create any new account now, but I'm going to make use of existing account. Now, after you click on sign me up, so I'm saying that you will receive account verification link to your email, and you can make use of that link in order to set the password. So once you set the password, how you can log into Salesforce account is by using the URL login.salesforce.com. In order to log into a Salesforce account, so you can log in using login.salesforce.com URL. So here, when you hit on this particular URL, you will be redirected to a page where you will be asked to enter the username and password. You can provide your username and password here and click on login. So with this, what happens is like you will get log into that particular Salesforce account. So now what I will do is, so like I will log into my the dev and QA accounts whichever I have. So before I open, I log into them. So like here, I'm using a word called as environment. So account or environment or organization or or all of these means the same. So like I will frequently use the term org. So org is nothing but it stands for account itself. So now, in order to log into account, I am saying that you can make use of this login.salesforce.com URL. So actually, like I forgot the password of my account, so let me try. Okay, so actually, like I don't remember the password of my dev and QA accounts, so I will log in a different way. Forget about this method of logging in. So like you will come to know this, come to know about this later. But let me quickly log into. Okay, so what I did is like instead of logging in by typing in username and password, I just logged in a different way. Don't worry about that. So we are going to see that way of logging later. So this is how a Salesforce account or org looks like. So now what I will do is, so this is my dev environment. So let me show you the username of this particular org. So what I did is I clicked on this doll icon and I clicked on my name, and post that I clicked on user detail button. So here, if you look at the username of the user with which I have logged in, so it's sai at the rate visualpath.com. So this is nothing but this is my dev or dev account. So now what I will do is I will create a component in this particular org, and I will show you how we can migrate that particular component from this account to QA account. Now, generally, when it comes to an application in software terminology, application is nothing but it is a collection of components. So if you take a web application, so the basic components which makes up the web application is you will see something called as pages, and you will see something called as controllers to which pages will be linked. So like pages are nothing but the web pages that gets opened whenever you open a web app. So like here page is a kind of component and controller is a kind of component. So like these are some of the basic components which makes a web application. So similar to that, so in Salesforce, what happens is like again, application is nothing but it is a collection of components, and lot of components makes an application in Salesforce. So now, if I want to tell you some of the components, like there will be a lot of variety of components. Like on Salesforce, what happens is like we'll have some 350 to 400 types of components which are available. So like we'll come to these different types later. But for now, just remember that application is nothing but it is a collection of components. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create one component in my dev account, and I will show you how we can migrate that particular component from dev account to QA account. So here, what I did is I, after logging into my Salesforce account, so like I am clicking on this particular tab named Object Manager. So clicking on Object Manager, what happens is it will display all of the objects that are present inside this particular Orgor account. And apart from that, it will also be possible to create an object from this particular page. So object is nothing but it is one type of component available on Salesforce platform. I will tell you about the purpose of object and the reason why people will make use of object later. But for now, let me create an object now. So you are actually like you are not required to worry about how you can create the components. So that's why like I'm not giving you much details on the purpose of the component now. So suppose if someone who doesn't have any kind of knowledge on Salesforce platform, so if they feel like they want a few more details or they want to understand the background on the purpose of the component, don't worry, I will explain that as well in the actual sessions. Now, what I will do is I'll click on create and I will select custom object here. Forget about this creation part for now. So what I will do is I will name this object as demo object VP batch 7. 1 minute. So I have one more class. Just let me update that I will join in 10 minutes. Okay. Now, so in the process of creating the object, what I am doing is I am giving for like generally on Salesforce platform, what happens is like whenever you try to create any component, you will be asked to give a name for that particular component. Now, I am naming this particular object as demo object VB batch 7. So like generally like for some of components, what happens is like you will be asked to give the name as well as a plural value for the name whichever you provide as well. So for now, like what I'm doing is even for plural label. So here you are seeing two options here. One is label and the other one is plural label. For both of things, I am giving the same name or value here. So forget about the purpose of plural label. So I'll tell you the usage of it later. But for now, like what I'm trying to do here is like I'm just trying to create a component. So which is nothing but an object. So I just gave a name for this particular object and I'm clicking on save. So on this particular page, so you're seeing like different options. Forget about those options. Each of those options has a specific purpose. Like and you are not required to about you are not required to worry about that because like generally the component creation will be done by developers or administrators. So I will click on save. So with this, what happened is like an object with the name demo object VB batch 7 got created. So now what I will do is, so let me quickly log into my QA org or QA account. So here in my QA account, if I go to object manager and if I type in demo here, so like you have an object with the name demo object VP batch 6, but you don't have an object with this particular name. So demo object VP batch 7 as of now in my QA account or QA org. Now what I will do is by using a tool called as Workbench, what I will do is I will migrate or move move or deploy this particular object from my dev account to QA account. So in real time, what happens is like you won't be like you are not required to have knowledge on how we will create the components. So developers will create the components, and what happens is like they will send a request to you asking to migrate the component. So what they will do is like let me frame a request. So they will either email you or they will message you saying that please deploy or migrate below component from dev to QA. And so apart from that, what they will do is they will specify the name of the component. So here, name of the component that needs to be migrated is demo object VP batch 7. So in the request itself, what happens is like they will specify the name of the object, and so they will also specify the type of that particular component as well. So in Salesforce, what happens is like for every component, there will be a name associated with it as well as a type associated with it. So what happens is like people will also specify the type of that particular component as well. So generally, the type of object is not object, so it's custom object. So they will specify the name and the type of the component that needs to be migrated. So you will get the request in this particular manner. So actually like you are required to handle this particular activity, but you are not required to create the component. So once you get a request from developer to migrate the component, what you will do is you will work on migrating that particular component. So now what I will do is, so like I will show you how we can migrate or deploy this particular component from dev account or dev or to QA or using Workbench. So now when it comes to Workbench, Workbench is a web-based tool which comes integrated with every Salesforce account. So in order to log into Workbench, what I will do is I will simply type in Workbench or just Workbench, and what I will do is, so there is a result called as workbench.developerforce.com. So I will open the first result, and here I will keep the environment as production because all of the developer edition type of accounts are production type of environment, are product equivalent to production environments. So I'll keep the environment as production, and I will check this particular checkbox here, and I will click on login with Salesforce. Okay, so it is asking for username and password. So generally, like what happens is like it will automatically pick the credentials of the Salesforce account, whichever we have logged in. So here, okay. So instead of giving the username and password, I just logged in a different way. So generally, like what happens is like if you first log into a Salesforce account, and if you try logging into Workbench, what happens is like automatically it will pick the credentials of the Salesforce account uh, that you have logged in on the same window of the browser. So here, what I have done is I have logged into my Workbench account of dev or I have logged into Workbench account using dev or credentials. This is nothing but Workbench account linked to dev org or account. So now, in order to migrate a component from one Salesforce org to another Salesforce org using Workbench, you need to do like you need to follow a couple of steps. One is, first step is like you should log into, you should log into source org. Source org is nothing but the org in which your components are present. And after you log into source org, the next step is you should create something called as package.xml. You should create an XML file to keep it simple. You should create an XML file where you will specify the components that needs to be migrated. So after you create this XML file, the next step is you should log into target org or the org into which you want to deploy this particular component. And after you before this there is one more step. So after you create an XML file, so the next step which you will do is you will do something called as retrieve operation. Next is after retrieve operation, you will log into workbench account of target org, and the final step is you will do something called as deploy operation. Okay, so these are the steps which will be involved in the process of migrating a component using Workbench. So as of now, like I have logged into Workbench account of source.org or dev.org, and now I need to prepare or create an XML file. So now, in order to create this particular XML file, you can make use of an extension that is available for Chrome. So what you can do is you can click on this extensions option and click on manage extensions, and you can add this particular extension with the name force.com migration tool package creator. 1 minute. Okay, so you can add this extension with the name force.com migration tool package creator. As of now, like this extension is already added to my browser, so that's why like I am not seeing add button here. So like what happens for you is you will when you type in the name of this particular extension, what happens is like an extension gets visible here, and you will see add button. You can click on add so that the extension gets added to your browser. So first thing is add that extension. So after adding the extension, hover your mouse over info option on the top here, and click on metadata types and components. So let me click on reset. So the reason why I am seeing a section called as package XML on the left hand side is because of the extension which I added. So if you don't add the extension, you won't see this particular section on the left hand side. So you can check in both ways. First log into Workbench and click on metadata types and components, and look at how the page looks like. You won't see package XML section on the left side without adding that particular extension. So after that, you can add the extension and look at the same page or refresh the page. So you will notice a section getting displayed on the left hand side. Now, what I will do is for this particular in this box, search metadata type, I will type in object, and I will click on custom object. So here it is nothing but you should search with the component type whichever you need to migrate. So I'm searching with custom object type, and as a result I got these many results here. So the object which I need to migrate is, so like when you type in the type of the component, what happens is like all of the components of that particular type present in this particular or gets displayed. So here what is happening is, as of now, like there are 273 objects in this particular or, and all of those objects are getting displayed here. Now, the object which I need to migrate is demo object VP batch file. So I'm just selecting on this particular checkbox. When I selected this particular checkbox, what happened is like this particular content got updated here. So if I uncheck this here, so like based on the component whichever you select here, this particular content gets updated. So I'm selecting this demo object VP batch 7. So after that, I will click on select test, and I'll copy this file code or this particular content. And next, what I will do is I will create a file on my system, and I will name the file as package vp batch 7 dot xml. So generally like it should be an XML file. So that's why like I'm ending it with dot xml. 1 second, let me recreate. vp batch 7 dot xml. So let me select the folder as a folder with my name, and I'm clicking on create file. So for this file content, I'm just copying the content, whichever I like pasting the content whichever I have copied from Workbench. So with this, what happened is like we have created an XML file where we are specifying the object that needs to be migrated or deployed. So now next step is I will log into Workbench account of target, or no, before that what I should do is like I should perform something called as retrieve operation. So retrieve operation will be performed on source org itself. So here what I will do is I will click, just hover my mouse over this migration option, and I will click on retrieve, and so I will click on choose file. So for the file, what I will do is I will select the package XML file which I have created in the previous step. So I have selected package bp batch7.xml file. So there are a couple of other options getting displayed here. So forget about those options for now. Let me click on next, and after clicking on next, I will click on retrieve. So you can see the status of the retrieve operation has succeeded, and you can see this to true, the done status to true. So as a response of the retrieve operation, what happened is like we got a zip file here. So I'm clicking on download option next to this particular zip file. So now what happened is we have sent a request to Salesforce server asking to give the code file of this particular component, the component which are we have specified in the package.xml. So as a response, what Salesforce did is like it provided us the code file of that particular component. So let me show you that. If I go to downloads on my system, and if I unzip this, so like these are the like inside this particular zip file or folder. So we have a folder with this particular name, and inside that there is a file called as package xml, and inside that there is a folder called as objects, and inside objects there is a file with this particular name. So if I open this particular file, so if you look at this, so this is nothing but this is code file of the component whichever we have created. So like whenever you create a component from Salesforce UI, in the backend, Salesforce will store the details of that particular component in this manner somewhere in the server. Now what we have done is we have sent a request to Salesforce server asking it to send the code file of this particular component that we have specified in the package.xml, and as a response Salesforce returned as the code file of that particular component. So that's what happened. So now after you do the retrieve operation, the next thing which you should do is you should log into Workbench account of target org, and you should perform deploy operation. So let me log out of this account. So generally, like at a time in a single window of browser, you can't log into two Workbench accounts, but you can make use of two windows. Like you can open an incognito window, and you can log in there. So as of now, like I don't remember the password, I'm logging out of my dev account or dev org, and what I will do is I will log into my QA account or QA org. I will complete the discussion in 5 minutes. So this is my QA account or QA org. So if I want to show you the username, so if you look at the username here, it's a sai@visualpath.com.qa. So earlier for my dev org, there was not .qa in the end. Now, what I will do is I will log into Workbench of Workbench account linked to QA org. So for that, I will type in Workbench again, and I will click on this first result. I'll select this checkbox, and I'll click on login with Salesforce. So now, if you look at the username here, it is sai@visualpath.com.qa. Now, I will hover my mouse again on migration, and I will click on deploy option here. And for file, what I will do is I will select the zip file which I got as a response in the retrieve operation. So I'll go to downloads, and so this is the zip file. which I got as a response for the retrieve operation. So after selecting the zip file, so if you look at this particular page, there are a few other options that are getting displayed here. So there is a specific purpose for each of these options. So I will tell you the purpose of these options later. But for now, I am not touching any of these options, and I will click on next. After clicking on next, I will click on this deploy button. So you can see the status has succeeded. So that means the deployment got succeeded. Now, if let me go to my QA org and let me click on this object manager. Now, if I type in demo here, so you can see an object with the name demo object VP batch 7. So with the because of this deploy operation which we did, so the object got deployed or migrated to QA account. So this is how you will migrate a component using this particular tool called as Workbench. Okay, so I will stop my discussion here. The reason why I explained you about this workbench as well is so in order for you to get an understanding on how I am explaining the things. So what you can do is you can provide your feedback to the institute people, and you can decide on whether to continue in this course or not. So you can share that particular feedback with the institute people, and based on the like number of people whoever are willing to continue in this course, we will form a batch with those people, and we will continue the rest of the sessions. So I'll stop my discussion here. Like if you have any questions, you can ask me. I will give you a couple of minutes. If you don't have any questions, I will close this session.
Hi, this is Mahesh. I have one question regarding the opportunities in Salesforce DevOps. So, are there specific roles for Salesforce DevOps, or is it part of the Salesforce development and they expect you to have the DevOps, like good
So
knowledge of DevOps?
I understood. I understood. So there is a separate role called as Salesforce Devops Engineer or Salesforce Release Engineer. So similar to Salesforce Developer or Salesforce Administrator or Salesforce Tester. So there is a separate role for separate role. And coming to the opportunities, so this particular role is in the evolving phase. Like there are no like we don't have much people in the market with this particular skill set. So like as it is in the evolving phase, you have good amount of chance to start a position to start your career with this particular role. And like even in today's market scenario, like at least one interview is getting scheduled for every week for even this particular role. And apart from that, so coming to the packages, you will see the same amount of package as developers for this particular role. And again we have like a separate position for this role. And even when it comes to developers, so like even developers will be required uh, sometimes as part of few projects. What happens is like even developers will be responsible for doing some kind of basic things in order to migrate a component. So this particular knowledge will be useful for developers as well.
One more question. Could you please explain like how a day looks like for a Salesforce release engineer? Because I
So
just understand for a developer, like you have user stories, you will be working on development, testing, dev testing, and pushing the changes to from one org to other org, right? Like that is like you have meetings, like refinements, all. But DevOps, do they have like meetings regularly, like a Scrum meetings? Can you explain like how a day looks like or a sprint look like?
Okay, so looking at the way you asked the question, so like I think you have some kind of real-time experience, right?
Yes, I have real time experience.
What is the size of the project in which you worked? Like how many development teams were there and how many developers were there?
I mean, like one development team,
So there was only one development team.
some projects, two developments. Yeah.
Okay, so in one project, one development team, and in another project, two development teams. So how many different environments were there in the projects which you worked?
Yeah, total dev, QA and UAT and prod like four.
Okay. Who used to take care of migrating the components from development to QA and QA to UAT and UAT to production?
We as a developer we do.
So whether you used any version control system there?
We currently use Copado.
Okay. So you are currently using Copado there. and
Mhm.
as a developer, you are taking the responsibilities of migrating the components using Copado. Copado.
Yeah, in our team, every developer does that. Like, it is not a separate role. That's what I want to understand. Like, because as a
Okay.
developer, we are expected to, push our changes. Yeah, and in terms of setting up the release and all, like, it's a round robin. So every release, one
Okay.
developer will take that
Yeah, understood.
responsibility.
Like
So yeah,
who did the whole of the setup? Like who configured? Like who created?
initially I think they went with some partner. So they did the setup and they provided the documentation how to do the deployments.
Hmm. So the thing is, so when it comes to the roles and responsibilities of this particular role, so earlier we didn't had a separate role for Salesforce DevOps engineer. Even developers used to take care of migrating the components. But what happened is once people started following DevOps process on Salesforce platform, so in the past few years, what happened is people started uh, creating a separate role for this particular position itself. So now, when it comes to the roles and responsibilities, what happens is you will be for one project, setting up this process will be a one-time activity. So this particular role will have much significance when you work in large development teams. So suppose let's assume that there are some 5 to development teams working on a single project, and let's assume that there is a QA org, a UAT org, and a production environment. So when you have when the number of development teams increases, what happens is even the number of components which you migrate on a daily basis increases. So once you set up the process, you will be primarily responsible for migrating the components from development environment to QA environment, and you will be responsible for migrating the component from QA to UAT, and you will be responsible for doing the production releases as well. So daily what happens is on majority of the projects, you will be involved in migrating the components from either migrating the components either to QA or UAT instances, and on the release day you will work on migrating the components to production environments. So in projects where a strict DevOps process is followed, what happens is the components will be first pushed to version control system, and from version control system, the components will be deployed to a Salesforce org. So in the process of pushing the components or code to version control system, so when we have a lot of development teams, what happens is we will see something called as conflicts. Apart from conflicts, so in the process of deploying the changes to an instance, you will also see something called as deployment errors as well. So together, what happens is when you have a lot of developers working in a single project, so in order to fix these deployment errors and in order to resolve these conflicts, it will take some amount of good time. So so majorly you will be dealing with resolving those deployment errors and conflicts as well. So that's how like uh, the roles of this active the activities of this particular role will look like.
So regarding the pushing the changes, developer will do the pushing, right? Like they will push their individual components to uh, yeah, next
So
arc. So
developer will
as a
push the
the
code to
engineer,
repository.
Mhm.
Yeah, so developer will push the code to repository, and after that, so what happens is they will create something called as pull request. So they will create a pull request from the branch to whichever he has pushed to the target branch. So for every org, what happens is there will be a branch present in the repository, and he will create something called as pull request in the backend.
Correct.
Yeah. So after developer creates the pull request, so there will be someone called as a tech lead who will review that particular pull request. And once the tech lead reviews the pull request and he approves, so DevOps engineer will also do few kind of checks from his end, and he will approve that particular pull request, and he will merge that particular pull request to the target branch. So in projects where a strict DevOps process is followed, developers will not be provided with the access to push the code to some higher branches. So like the branches linked to QA org, UAT org, and production org. Even what happens is like developers will not be provided with the system administrator access in QA, UAT, and production orgs, because there will be a chance of doing the things manually in these orgs.
Correct.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, I understand this, but what is the extent of work? Because mm, this pull request, for example, if everything is looking good, then approving a pull request doesn't take much time. It's a click of a button. Okay, merging is a click of a button. Then
Yeah.
deploying is a click of a button. So exactly, once we set up, on a day to day, I'm trying to understand how much work a DevOps engineer will have.
So, so based on the size of the project, it will take 4 to 8 hours in order to do these activities as well. So even though it looks like a clicking a button, so let's assume that you get a conflict. So suppose a developer has modified a profile, and you are trying to deploy, changes happened on a profile. So in the process of creating the pull request, let's assume that developer got a conflict. So let's assume that you got 10 such requests in a single day, and let's assume that you got conflicts on 5 of the requests. So in order to resolve the conflicts, it will take on a large project. It will take a good amount of time, and let's assume that after you resolve the conflicts, the deployment jobs gets triggered, and it will be your responsibility to monitor the deployment job and make sure that the deployment happens successfully. Let's assume that out of these 10 requests, for 5 requests, the deployments failed with some reasons initially. So you should explain the developer the reason for which the deployment failed, and you should explain him about the fix as well. So in order to do this, it will take a good amount of time in large projects.
Okay, and last question, do you have Scrum meetings like in Dev
Yes,
we have like regular refinement meetings? For this one we don't have refinement, right? Only maybe stand
will
up.
join. Yeah, you will join the meetings whichever actually in small sized projects. What happens is you will join the stand-ups whichever the development teams have regularly. So we will have regular DSUs for development teams, right? You will join those stand-ups itself, and you will if you have any migration requests on your name, you will give an update on uh, those requests. So in large projects, what happens is we will have a separate call with the dev teams. What happens there is we will have a separate call with the leads of each of the development team, or someone from each development team will join that particular call, and we will join from the DevOps team. So we will see that kind of behavior in large projects. So it will depend on the size of the project.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions from anyone?